You wake up every morning and slip into a character. You know the lines, the gestures, the tone. You know how to appear competent, confident, calm, unshakable. You perform for everyone around you, the friends, the family, the colleagues, the strangers, and somewhere along the way, you start performing for yourself too. The applause, the approval, the quiet recognition, it becomes addictive. And for a while, it works. The mask protects you. The role gives you safety. The performance creates order in a world that often feels chaotic. But the danger is silent. It creeps in slowly. What once saved you begins to suffocate you. The armor that was meant to protect your spirit becomes the very cage that constricts it. You may not notice at first. You may tell yourself, this is just who I am, this is just life. But deep down, something is eroding. Fatigue settles into your body, tension knots your shoulders, restlessness takes over your nights. The mind grows weary from constant calculation what to say, how to act, how to be seen. Your emotions become filtered, muted or constrained because every response must align with the role, not with your truth. The irony is brutal. The very thing you relied on for survival now threatens your existence, not physically, but spiritually. The role you inhabit promises safety, but it demands sacrifice. It asks you to be someone you are not, to prioritize perception over presence, to trade authenticity for acceptability. The longer you inhabit it, the more energy it drains, the more it isolates you from yourself. Your identity becomes a performance, and in performing, you lose touch with the essence of who you are. Roles are seductive because they provide a clear map. They tell you how to act, how to speak, how to respond. They give you direction when the world seems chaotic. But growth demands change, and roles demand consistency. And when consistency overrides truth, you begin to decay. Emotional tension builds, relationships lose depth. You feel a quiet disconnection from life itself. You begin to ask yourself, is this all there is? Is this who I really am? And you may answer with fear, because letting go of a role feels like death. It feels like losing security, respect, identity. But here is the truth that most avoid: you are not the role. The mask is not the self. The applause is not the measure of worth. The roles you inhabit are temporary, functional, protective, but they are not you. You are the consciousness that observes them, the awareness that feels the strain, the inner voice that recognizes the dissonance. And this awareness is not weak, it is power. It is the first step toward liberation. Liberation does not come from rebellion or denial. It comes from discipline, from courage, from honesty. It comes from sitting with discomfort, acknowledging the exhaustion, and asking the hard question, what is real here? What serves my growth, and what binds me? True strength lies not in maintaining the illusion, but in confronting it, in dismantling the armor that no longer protects, in stepping out of the performance and reclaiming presence, integrity, and agency. The world may resist your change. People may react with confusion, disappointment, or expectation. But your freedom is not granted by others. It is claimed by you. Each moment you act in alignment with your truth, each choice to honor authenticity over approval, each refusal to be confined by a role, is a reclamation of power. This is not comfortable. It is not easy. But comfort has never been the measure of life lived fully. Courage is the measure. If you feel trapped, it is a signal, not a sentence. The cage you perceive is real, but it is also permeable. The walls are maintained by habit, fear, and attachment, and these walls can be dismantled. Awareness, discipline, and deliberate action are the tools. The path forward is not to become another role, not to perform another mask, but to allow the roles to fall away, one by one, until only the truth of your presence remains. You are not the mask, you are not the character, you are not the performance. You are the life behind the performance, the energy behind the mask, the clarity beyond the roles. And when you begin to live from that place, you stop being trapped. You stop being consumed. You begin to exist in a way that is whole, unfiltered, and alive. You walk through your days wearing a mask so seamless that even you forget it is there. From the moment you wake until the moment your eyes close at night, you are performing. Every gesture, every word, every breath is calculated in some way, consciously or unconsciously, to fit a mold, to meet an expectation, to satisfy an image. You speak in tones that are not fully yours, laugh in ways that feel slightly off, and make choices that reflect what is expected of someone in your place. rather than what your inner self truly desires. This is not necessarily malicious or deceptive, it is human. We learn early that conformity brings safety, approval, and belonging, and so we adopt roles as shields. But what happens when that shield hardens into a cage? When the thing meant to protect your essence begins to suppress it? The paradox of human performance is that it can feel like mastery while quietly eroding your authenticity. You are not who you perform to be. You are not the armor, the mask, or the costume. You are not the relentless provider, the unshakable friend, the tireless worker, the unwavering achiever. You are not the person everyone believes you to be, because performance, by nature, is a projection. It is designed to be seen, evaluated, and often approved from the outside. And yet, somewhere beneath the surface, the real you waits, constrained by the expectations you have internalized. You may believe that your competence defines you, that your ability to fulfill roles makes you real. You may measure your worth by how convincingly you inhabit a persona, how well you adhere to rules, how consistently you deliver, how flawlessly you perform. But these measures are illusions. They are external markers, not reflections of the inner life. The real self does not thrive on applause or recognition. It does not calculate responses for maximum approval. It grows quietly, imperceptibly, in moments when the mask slips and nothing is performed at all. The danger lies in conflating performance with identity. When you begin to believe that the act of performing is the act of being, you give away your power. You hand over your agency to expectations, social norms, and the judgments of others. You start to live a life not as yourself, but as a carefully constructed version of what others think you should be. In doing so, you disconnect from your instincts, your desires, your fears, your truths. You begin to inhabit a space that feels familiar and safe on the surface, but becomes increasingly hollow within. Emotional exhaustion, a sense of emptiness, or a persistent restlessness is often the first warning that performance has overtaken authenticity. Your body, which cannot be lied to in the long term, begins to register the discrepancy. Tension mounts in the shoulders, the neck, the jaw. Sleep becomes restless, appetite irregular, moods swing, and even minor challenges feel magnified. This is the subtle voice of your true self whispering, reminding you that a role is not a reality, that compliance is not fulfillment. Every relationship becomes filtered through the persona you maintain. Friendships are navigated with the unspoken awareness of how you must appear. Love is offered in a way that reflects expectation rather than desire, and work is pursued in alignment with validation rather than passion. The more convincingly you perform, the more invisible the real you becomes, not just to others, but to yourself. And yet beneath the constructed exterior, the self persists. It may feel distant, muted, or faint, but it is persistent. It waits in quiet moments, in the silence between conversations, in the empty spaces before sleep, in the fleeting seconds of solitude. It is the part of you that craves authenticity, that recognizes when performance has become a prison, that aches for the freedom to act and feel without expectation. Recognizing that you are not who you perform to be is not an indictment, it is an invitation. It is the first step toward reclaiming your existence from the roles that have defined you for convenience, comfort, or survival. It is a call to observe the ways you conform, to note where you are compensating, to question the habits that maintain the illusion of identity. And in that observation, there is power, because you can begin to disentangle performance from being, to understand that the person who shows up in front of others is only one layer, not the core. By observing, you can start to feel the subtle distinctions between what is expected of you and what you desire, between what you perform because it is demanded and what you express because it is true. You can begin to notice how often your decisions are informed not by your instincts, but by a need to maintain an image, and how that image has been quietly dictating your emotional responses, your choices, and even your sense of worth. In this awareness, there is a path to liberation, because you can begin to reclaim the choices that belong to the self beneath the mask. You may find that the mask is comforting, that it has allowed you to survive, to excel, to avoid confrontation or judgment. But you can also begin to recognize that comfort has a cost. It is a cost measured in quiet despair, in exhaustion, in the persistent feeling that something essential is missing. You are not the persona you maintain. You are not the roles you inhabit, no matter how essential they appear to the world. You are the consciousness that perceives these roles, that feels the strain of performance, that knows the yearning for authenticity. You are the part of yourself that can observe the mask and still recognize that it is not the whole story. You are the self that can, in small or large ways, begin to reclaim your life from the scripts that have been written for you. And in doing so, you can start to inhabit your existence with a degree of truth, presence, and agency that performance can never provide. At some point in life, you adopt roles because they serve a purpose. They shield you from discomfort, rejection, or danger. They offer a framework through which the world feels manageable, predictable, and safe. As a child, a smile or a gesture may have won approval, and over time, those behaviors solidified into roles. Perhaps you became the responsible one, the caretaker, the high achiever, the quiet observer, or the strong friend who never falters. In the beginning, these roles were protective, allowing you to navigate uncertainty, social pressures, and emotional turbulence with a sense of stability. They were tools, ways of adapting to a world that demands conformity, while simultaneously testing individuality. They were not meant to define you permanently. They were meant to keep you alive, functional, and connected. But protection has a hidden danger. What begins as a shelter can become a trap. The very mechanisms that kept you safe start to limit the natural evolution of your selfhood. You begin to internalize the expectations that shaped your role, believing them to be not just strategies for survival, but essential definitions of who you are. Over time, a role transforms from something you do into something you are, and suddenly, freedom becomes frightening. The boundaries that once felt reassuring now feel restrictive. The armor that protected your heart also weighs it down, constricting movement, expression, and growth. You may not even notice it at first. The transition is subtle. A responsibility that once felt meaningful now feels burdensome. Praise that once felt validating now feels obligatory. Conversations that once felt easy now feel performative. The role that kept you connected to others now keeps you distant from yourself. This is the paradox of adaptation. The very behaviors and identities that help you survive can, if left unquestioned, become prisons that suffocate your potential. Every role carries with it expectations, and every expectation carries the weight of compliance. Over time, the energy required to maintain appearances begins to erode authenticity. You speak in ways that feel safe rather than truthful. You make choices that avoid conflict rather than reflect desire. You navigate relationships cautiously, prioritizing acceptance over intimacy. The role protects you from rejection, but it also protects you from genuine connection. It shields you from judgment, but it also shields you from self-discovery. When you are confined by a role, you exist in a liminal space, visible, performing, and accepted, yet simultaneously invisible to yourself. Emotional tension builds, often manifesting as anxiety, fatigue, restlessness, or subtle dissatisfaction. The mind begins to feel fragmented because you are performing in one way while your inner self yearns for another. The body, too, carries the strain of confinement. Physical tension, sleep disturbances, and even chronic stress arise as your lived reality diverges from your authentic impulses. The protective role that once gave you structure now demands conformity, sacrificing spontaneity and flexibility. Social feedback reinforces the illusion that your survival depends on the role. Approval, praise, and recognition become the metrics of worth, keeping you locked into patterns that no longer serve you. Letting go feels dangerous because the role has been tied to identity for so long. What will happen if you stop being the responsible one, the strong one, or the reliable one? What if the very shields you relied on crumble? The fear of loss is real, yet it is precisely the fear that signals the need for change. Awareness of this dynamic is the first step in reclaiming freedom. To recognize that a role can protect and imprison simultaneously is to acknowledge the duality of adaptation. It is to understand that safety and limitation are not opposites but intertwined, and that the behaviors that once allowed you to navigate the world effectively can, if rigidly maintained, constrain your growth. The role's protective quality is seductive. It convinces you that conformity is comfort, and that consistency is security. But beneath that seduction lies a hidden cost, the gradual erosion of self. Creativity diminishes, intuition dulls, emotional responsiveness contracts, and the subtle sparks of curiosity and desire are muted. The longer a role is maintained unquestioningly, the more it defines the boundaries of your reality, telling you what is possible and what is not based on your innate capacities, but on the expectations imposed by others or by circumstances. Freedom becomes a distant idea because the structure that once felt life-giving now dictates behavior, thought, and feeling. In this way, the prison is not always obvious. Walls are often invisible until you test their limits. You may feel a persistent unease without understanding its source. You may find yourself trapped in cycles of behavior, repeating patterns that no longer serve, but that you cannot escape. And yet, the very awareness that these walls exist is the first indication that the cage can be dismantled, because protection and prison are two sides of the same coin, and recognition allows you to choose whether to remain confined or to begin the slow, deliberate work of liberation. Human beings have an extraordinary capacity for adaptation, and nowhere is this more evident than in the identities we construct. From early childhood, we are shaped by expectations, experiences, and social norms, and in response, we develop ways of defining ourselves. We become the responsible one, the strong one, the smart one, the caregiver, or any of countless roles designed to navigate the world. Over time, these labels are no longer simply convenient descriptions or temporary strategies. They become fundamental to how we understand our own existence. We become attached to them, not just in thought, but in emotion. This attachment feels natural because identity offers a sense of stability, coherence, and predictability in a world that is often chaotic. To know who we are, or at least who we appear to be, is to anchor ourselves amidst uncertainty. But this anchoring has a shadow. When attachment to identity becomes rigid, it creates suffering. The suffering is subtle at first, manifesting as a quiet tension beneath the surface of everyday life. You may notice it in hesitation, in the reluctance to try new things, in a sense of being boxed in by the very qualities you have long celebrated. You may find yourself defending your identity more vigorously than engaging with life. A proud achiever resists failure, a caregiver resists asking for help, a strong, stoic individual resists showing vulnerability. In each case, the attachment is both protective and constrictive. The mind interprets challenges not as opportunities for growth, but as threats to identity. Any suggestion that you might be something other than what you have defined yourself to be triggers resistance, fear, or anxiety. Criticism, rejection, or even gentle observation from others can feel like existential attacks, because identity has been elevated from description to truth. The irony is that identity, which is supposed to help you navigate life, becomes the very source of limitation. When the self is rigidly attached to particular traits, achievements, or roles, every situation is filtered through a lens of self-preservation. Decisions are no longer made purely from curiosity, intuition, or moral reasoning. They are made to maintain consistency with identity. You speak in ways that reinforce the story you tell yourself about who you are, even when silence, honesty, or vulnerability would be more truthful. You act in ways that protect reputation rather than cultivate experience. The natural flow of life, full of unpredictability, growth, and transformation, is obstructed by the need to maintain continuity with a constructed self. This creates internal conflict. On the one hand, there is desire, intuition, and the pull of authentic expression. On the other, there is the pressure to conform to the identity that has been built over years. The friction between these forces is what generates suffering. Emotional responses are often amplified, not by the events themselves, but by the perceived threat to identity. Shame, guilt, embarrassment, and defensiveness are intensified because the mind interprets them as assaults on the self rather than natural feedback from experience. You may find yourself clinging to successes long after they have ceased to be meaningful, or resisting failures that are inevitable, simply because both have become entwined with the story you tell about who you are. This attachment also shapes relationships. Interactions are often performed, filtered, and evaluated through the lens of identity. You seek approval not just for behavior, but for the persona you inhabit. You avoid situations where that identity could be challenged. You may unconsciously push people away or manipulate circumstances to preserve the image you have cultivated. Authentic connection suffers because it is subordinated to the preservation of identity. Even personal growth can feel threatening. When you begin to change, learn, or expand beyond familiar patterns, identity demands that you reconcile these shifts with the old story. This creates tension. Part of you yearns for growth, while another part clings to the comfort of the familiar self. The struggle manifests as indecision, procrastination, or a persistent sense of dissatisfaction. You may feel restless, yet powerless to act, because every attempt to move forward feels like a betrayal of the self you have known. Attachment to identity also distorts perception of reality. Experiences, people, and opportunities are judged less on their intrinsic qualities and more on how they confirm or challenge your self-concept. Successes are celebrated only insofar as they reinforce identity. Failures are feared disproportionately because they threaten it. In this way, identity functions as both a lens and a filter, coloring reality according to the demands of self-preservation rather than clarity or truth. Freedom is curtailed because action is limited to what is consistent with who you believe yourself to be. Liberation from suffering begins with awareness. The first step is recognizing that identity is not fixed. Traits, roles, and self-concepts are not immutable. They are constructions, often necessary for navigating life, but ultimately provisional. By observing attachment without judgment, you can begin to disentangle the self from the roles, expectations, and narratives that constrain it. Awareness allows you to see the ways attachment drives thought, emotion, and behavior, and to discern when it limits experience rather than enhancing it. You may notice impulses, desires, or curiosities that conflict with the constructed self. You may experience moments of discomfort, hesitation, or resistance. These are signals, not failures. They indicate the presence of attachment and provide opportunities to choose action based on authenticity rather than preservation. Gradually, it becomes possible to inhabit life with less reactivity, less defensiveness, and greater flexibility. You can engage with experiences more fully because you are not constantly calculating how they reflect on identity. You can interact with others more genuinely because the need to perform a particular self has diminished. You can explore, experiment, and evolve because the self is recognized as fluid, not fixed, and security is found in presence and discernment rather than in adherence to a role. In this process, suffering diminishes not through avoidance or control, but through awareness, acceptance, and the willingness to let the self be more than its attachments. Discomfort is often seen as something to avoid, an unpleasant sensation to be silenced, ignored, or mitigated. Yet discomfort is not an enemy. It is a signal, a message, a subtle, persistent nudge from life itself. It arises when what you are doing, thinking, or being is out of alignment with what you truly need, desire, or are capable of. It manifests in countless ways: a knot in the stomach, a tightness in the chest, restlessness in the mind, a lingering dissatisfaction that colors even ordinary moments. Many try to escape it through distraction, consumption, or reassurance, but discomfort is persistent because it is functional. It exists to awaken awareness, to illuminate areas where growth is stalled, where adaptation is necessary, where the old patterns no longer serve. To dismiss discomfort is to ignore the language of change, to resist the cues that guide evolution of self and circumstance. Human beings are wired to seek comfort. Comfort signals safety, predictability, and a sense of control. Yet life is dynamic, and the very act of remaining in comfort over prolonged periods can become stagnation. When you cling to stability, to familiar routines, or to roles that feel secure, discomfort emerges as an irritant. It surfaces in moments of boredom, frustration, anxiety, or subtle unease. These sensations, while uncomfortable, are not arbitrary. They are indicators that something in your external or internal environment is misaligned with your development, values, or potential. Discomfort can appear as internal conflict. When your actions are inconsistent with your beliefs, it may appear as relational tension. When interactions expose unacknowledged truths, it may appear as physical strain. When the body signals that it is being pushed beyond habitual limits. Each form is a messenger, asking you to pay attention, to reassess, to reconsider, to act. The instinct to flee from discomfort is strong, yet this avoidance often prolongs suffering rather than resolving it. By immediately seeking relief, You deny the opportunity for insight and growth. Discomfort is a teacher that demands presence. The mind may resist, labeling discomfort as failure, inadequacy, or danger. It may invent narratives of victimhood, frustration, or inevitability to justify avoidance. But underneath the story, the signal is simple: the current state is unsustainable. Change is required. Ignoring discomfort is akin to ignoring a warning light in a complex machine. The light does not exist to punish, it exists to prevent breakdown. Discomfort operates in the same way. It is an early alert, providing the chance to correct, adjust, or transform before crisis becomes unavoidable. Growth is never comfortable. Learning, adaptation, and evolution demand the crossing of thresholds, the stretching of limits, and the confrontation of uncertainty. Every significant shift in life, from personal development to career transformation, from emotional maturity to relational deepening, requires movement through discomfort. Pain, frustration, or fear are not anomalies in the process, they are essential companions. The presence of discomfort does not indicate inadequacy, it indicates awareness. It signals that the mind and body are registering a gap between the familiar and the necessary, between stagnation and potential. Recognizing discomfort as a guide rather than a punishment allows a fundamental shift in perspective. Rather than asking, "Why am I suffering?" or "What is wrong with this?" you begin to ask, "What is this showing me?" or "Where does this tension point?" This simple reorientation transforms discomfort from a burden into a compass. Acting on discomfort requires honesty, courage, and discernment. It demands that you face the aspects of life that are misaligned and make choices that may challenge habit, convenience, or expectation. This could mean confronting long-standing fears, leaving a role that no longer fits, engaging in difficult conversations, or pursuing paths that feel risky yet necessary. Each encounter with discomfort, when approached consciously, becomes a stepping stone rather than an obstacle. Resistance to discomfort is fueled by attachment, to identity, to outcomes, to stability. But recognizing it as a signal loosens that attachment. You begin to perceive discomfort as informative, not threatening. You observe its patterns, notice its triggers, and listen to its guidance. Discomfort teaches patience because change is rarely instantaneous. It teaches resilience because acting in alignment with its signal often requires sustained effort against inertia. It teaches discernment because not every uncomfortable sensation requires immediate action, yet none should be ignored. The body, mind, and emotions work together to create a feedback system. Discomfort arises when this system detects disharmony or stagnation. By attending to these signals with clarity and intention, you cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and adaptive capacity. The moments of discomfort you encounter in life are therefore not interruptions, they are invitations. They mark thresholds where transformation is possible, where habits can be revised, where roles can be redefined, and where the self can be reclaimed from patterns that no longer serve its growth. Each signal is precise, pointing toward areas that need courage, attention, and action. By following discomfort instead of avoiding it, you engage in a dialogue with life itself, learning to interpret its messages, respond intentionally, and evolve continuously. Discipline is often misunderstood as rigid restriction, as an imposition of control over freedom, or as a punishment imposed on the self. Yet the essence of discipline is not limitation but clarification. It is a tool for revealing truth beneath illusion, for cutting away what is superficial, convenient, or deceptive so that what remains is genuine and functional. Discipline is not designed to destroy you, it is designed to destroy the false narratives and self-deceptions that obscure your capacity, clarity, and strength. In daily life, humans construct countless illusions to navigate uncertainty and to maintain a sense of safety. These illusions appear as comforting beliefs about identity, as avoidance strategies, or as justifications for behavior that is inconsistent with values. They promise stability, acceptance, or control, yet in reality they bind energy, distort perception, and limit action. Discipline acts as a lens, exposing the discrepancy between what is imagined and what is real, between the stories we tell ourselves and the facts of our behavior, capability, and circumstance. It is often through discipline that the illusions we cling to become apparent. When we commit to consistent practice, whether in thought, action, or habit, We begin to see where convenience has replaced authenticity, where avoidance has replaced courage, and where self-deception has replaced self-knowledge. Discipline does not assault the self, it confronts the falsehoods that we have accepted as self. Many resist discipline because they conflate the dismantling of illusions with personal harm. They perceive the discomfort of consistency, focus, or accountability as an attack on freedom or identity. Yet this resistance is a sign of how tightly the illusions have been woven into the fabric of perception. The fear of discipline is actually the fear of clarity, the fear of being confronted with the truth of one's own limitations, habits, and choices. To practice discipline is to willingly enter a process of scrutiny, to subject every action, thought, and emotion to observation and evaluation. It is a systematic inquiry into whether life is being lived according to convenience or according to principle, whether effort is being expended in alignment with purpose or diffused through distraction. Discipline is not inherently punitive. Its rigor is a mirror reflecting inconsistencies that must be addressed for growth to occur. Consider the habitual patterns that dominate daily life: distractions, procrastination, indulgences, avoidance, excuses. These patterns are forms of self-deception, comfortable illusions that suggest productivity, happiness, or success while in fact diluting energy, delaying progress, and eroding authenticity. Discipline confronts these patterns. It does not reward the illusion with indulgence, nor does it attack the self for weakness. Instead, it illuminates the mechanics of habit and the choices that reinforce falsehood. In doing so, discipline produces clarity. When you maintain a disciplined practice in any domain, physical, mental, emotional, you learn to differentiate between what is essential and what is superfluous. Repetition, consistency, and focused effort reveal gaps in ability, commitment, and understanding. Illusions crumble not because you are failing, but because they cannot withstand scrutiny. The mind, which once justified shortcuts, excuses, and self-deception, can no longer hide from observation. Discipline fosters self-awareness because it creates structure against which truth is measured. In the absence of discipline, life can be lived in a fog, guided by convenience, ego, or avoidance. Illusions persist because no framework exists to test their validity. Discipline acts as that framework. By holding yourself accountable to a process, by establishing routines that demand attention, by cultivating habits that require persistence, you uncover the difference between the stories you tell and the reality of what you do. This process is inherently uncomfortable because illusions are comfortable. They provide a sense of identity, control, and stability. Discipline removes the comfort, but not the self. It dismantles the familiar in order to allow the real to emerge. It teaches resilience because facing the truth repeatedly strengthens the capacity to act from reality rather than fiction. It teaches humility because it exposes gaps in knowledge, skill, or understanding that were previously hidden behind rationalization or pride. Discipline also teaches freedom, paradoxically, because freedom is not the ability to indulge illusion without consequence. Freedom is the ability to act with clarity, purpose, and integrity. By destroying illusions, discipline liberates the mind and body from patterns that limit action, perception, and potential. The person who is disciplined becomes capable of facing reality as it is, without distortion, without defensiveness, and without reliance on comforting stories. In this process, the self is not destroyed, it is revealed. Strength, endurance, creativity, and adaptability flourish precisely because the energy previously invested in maintaining illusions is now available for genuine engagement with life. Discipline fosters a deep intimacy with truth, which is the foundation of power, clarity, and inner peace. Illusions may be painful to confront, but they are not part of the self. What remains after they are dismantled is resilience, insight, and capacity, which can endure challenge, change, and uncertainty. True freedom is often misunderstood as the absence of constraint, the ability to act without limits, or the license to do whatever one desires. Yet this is not freedom, this is chaos masquerading as liberation. Real freedom is far subtler, far deeper, and it begins not with avoidance of responsibility, but with its full acceptance. Responsibility is the acknowledgement that your actions, choices, and commitments shape not only your own life, but also the lives of those around you. It is the understanding that liberty without accountability is hollow, and that the capacity to act meaningfully comes only when you recognize the weight of consequence. To ignore responsibility in the pursuit of freedom is to mistake indulgence for agency. When life is approached as a series of demands to evade, rules to bypass, or expectations to reject, what is gained is only temporary relief, not true autonomy. Freedom rooted in avoidance is fragile. It bends and breaks under the slightest pressure because it has no foundation. Responsibility, by contrast, is the framework that supports enduring freedom. It is the structure that allows choice to be exercised with clarity, power, and integrity. Accepting responsibility begins with self-awareness. It requires looking unflinchingly at the patterns, habits, and decisions that have brought you to this moment, and understanding how they align, or fail to align, with your values, principles, and goals. This awareness is not a source of guilt, it is a tool for empowerment. By seeing where you have acted consciously or unconsciously, where you have contributed to outcomes, where you have allowed inertia or external pressures to dictate your path, you claim authority over your own existence. Without this ownership, freedom is an illusion because your life remains at the mercy of forces you do not acknowledge. Responsibility extends beyond self-mastery. It encompasses the understanding that your choices resonate outward. Every action affects your environment, your relationships, and the broader web of life in ways both visible and subtle. True freedom, then, requires cultivating awareness of these effects, embracing the obligation to act thoughtfully, and committing to align behavior with intention. This does not mean self-denial or submission, it means intentionality. It is the difference between wandering aimlessly and navigating with a map, between reacting passively to circumstance and creating life consciously. Responsibility teaches patience, because it reminds you that actions have consequences that may not be immediate. It teaches foresight because the freedom you seek is sustained by consideration of how choices ripple through time and space. It teaches courage because taking full ownership of life means facing discomfort, uncertainty, and the weight of accountability. Paradoxically, the acceptance of responsibility creates liberation. When you refuse to be accountable, you are tethered to external conditions, opinions, and restrictions. Your choices are filtered through fear, avoidance, or deflection. You are trapped by dependency, circumstance, or the illusion that life happens to you. By contrast, responsibility untangles these bonds. By acknowledging your role in shaping experience, you gain the ability to act with authority. You are no longer merely responding to the world, you are engaging it on your terms, guided by awareness and purpose. Freedom and responsibility are inseparable, because the ability to act freely is meaningless without the capacity to direct those actions wisely. A person who flouts consequence in the name of liberty is enslaved to impulsivity, habit, or desire. A person who understands the power of choice and embraces the obligation to wield it consciously experiences genuine autonomy. Discipline, consistency, and integrity become tools of freedom rather than constraints upon it. Responsibility also cultivates resilience. When you own your decisions, even failures become opportunities for learning and growth. Each setback is no longer a source of external blame, but a mirror reflecting areas for adjustment, understanding, or refinement. This resilience is a hallmark of freedom because it allows you to navigate uncertainty without being undone by circumstance. Furthermore, responsibility fosters authenticity. The more you acknowledge the influence of your choices, the less you can hide behind excuses, masks, or roles. You are compelled to act in alignment with your values, to speak truthfully, and to inhabit your existence fully. Freedom, therefore, is not a gift bestowed by circumstance. It is a state earned through the courage to face reality, accept consequence, and engage deliberately with life. It requires ongoing attention because responsibility is not a single act, but a continuous practice. Each day presents decisions, temptations, challenges, and opportunities to act either in alignment with awareness or in avoidance of it. By consistently choosing alignment, freedom is not an abstract ideal but a lived experience. It grows as a muscle, strengthened by repeated engagement, tested by difficulty, and expanded by understanding. To neglect responsibility is to stunt this growth. To embrace it is to step into power, clarity, and agency. Responsibility is the soil from which freedom flourishes, the structure that allows it to endure, and the mirror that ensures it is genuine rather than illusory.